In the early years of the 14th century, trade routes stretched like lifelines across continents. Caravans of merchants carried silk, spices, precious metals, and stories from faraway lands. These roads connected the bustling cities of Europe to the distant and mysterious empires of the East. Alongside goods and culture, however, something invisible also began its journey. It was not gold nor silk, but a silent force that would change the world. In the arid steppes of Central Asia, life was harsh but thriving. Towns near the Silk Road saw travelers from every direction. Hidden among the rodents and their fleas, a deadly bacterium found its perfect home. It thrived quietly inside the warm bodies of black rats, creatures that often traveled unnoticed in grain sacks and cargo wagons. This tiny organism, later known as Yersinia pestis, had no intention, no plan, yet it was about to reshape human history. Mongol armies ruled vast territories at the time, creating an unprecedented network of movement. Horses thundered across plains, traders crossed deserts, and ships sailed crowded ports. Each journey unknowingly carried more than merchandise. Fleas, jumping from rat to rat, and sometimes to humans, spread the plague across distances unimaginable in earlier centuries. No one could sense the danger. To them, life was as it had always been. Markets bustled, temples echoed with prayers, and kings planned their conquests. But in the cracks of wooden carts, beneath piles of grain, and inside the dark corners of merchant ships, death was traveling patiently. It crossed borders without permission, followed merchants into cities, and waited for its moment to emerge. The origin of the Black Plague was not a sudden strike. It was a long and quiet march, hidden beneath the pulse of trade, waiting to reveal its shadow over the world. By the year 1331, whispers began to rise in the villages of Central Asia. A strange sickness was spreading, moving from one settlement to another with alarming speed. At first, no one understood what it was. People spoke of a fever that burned through the night, of swellings on the body the size of eggs, and of the way life could vanish in a single day. Some believed it was a curse. Others thought it was punishment from the heavens. No one imagined it was carried by creatures too small to see. The disease struck without mercy. A healthy man could fall ill in the morning and lie breathless by sunset. Families huddled in fear, watching their loved ones turn pale, tremble, and collapse. In some towns, entire streets fell silent. The few who survived were left with hollow eyes, surrounded by the echoes of lost voices. Travelers avoided infected areas, but the sickness always found new paths. Fleas leapt onto passing animals, and rats followed caravans as if drawn by fate. Rumors grew as quickly as the illness itself. Traders arriving in distant cities brought both goods and grim stories. They spoke of villages where no one remained alive, of temples filled with candles for the dead, and of skies that seemed darker than before. Authorities tried to seal off roads, but it was too late. The infection had already slipped past their reach. In bustling trading hubs, where languages mixed and cultures met, the unseen invader multiplied. Ships loaded with grain became floating vessels of death. Merchants counted their coins, unaware that the real price of their journeys was not measured in gold, but in lives. A storm was gathering, silent but relentless, and it was heading toward the heart of the world. The Silk Road, once a symbol of prosperity and cultural exchange, became a bridge for something far more sinister. As merchants continued their journeys, black rats traveled with them, clinging to sacks of grain and hiding in the shadows of wooden carts. Fleas, now full of infected blood, waited for new hosts. Each stop along the route was another spark, and the trail of infection grew brighter, though no one could yet see the full fire. By 1346, the plague had reached the bustling city of Kaffa on the Crimean coast. This city, a critical trading post between east and west, was alive with the sounds of commerce and the scent of distant spices. Ships from the Mediterranean anchored at its harbor, and traders from across continents filled its markets. But behind the lively scene, sickness crept through the narrow alleys. Rats scurried along ropes, moving from carts to warehouses, from warehouses to ships. The Mongol army besieging Kaffa began to fall ill. Soldiers coughed blood, their bodies burned with fever, and strange swellings marked their skin. In desperation, they catapulted infected corpses over the city walls, hoping to weaken their enemies. Inside the city, panic spread faster than the sickness itself. People fled toward the docks, desperate to escape, but the ships waiting for them carried death as well. Rats and fleas boarded alongside terrified passengers, ensuring the plague would not stay behind. As the ships sailed westward, no one aboard understood that their journey would change the fate of nations. The calm sea winds pushed the vessels toward Europe, carrying not only silk and spices, but also a silent killer. The Black Plague had found its highway, and nothing would stop it now. When the ships from Kaffa reached the ports of Messina in Sicily in 1347, they carried an invisible storm. Dock workers noticed the rats first, crawling out from the cargo holds in unnatural numbers. Then the sickness appeared among the sailors. Many were already dead when the ships arrived. Their faces were pale and bruised, their bodies marked by swollen buboes under the arms and around the neck. Those still alive coughed blood and begged for help. Within days, the plague leapt from the ships into the city. At first, the citizens did not understand. They thought it was a fever brought by foreigners. But soon entire families began to fall ill. Doctors, with their limited knowledge, tried everything they could. They bled patients, burned herbs, and prayed to saints, but nothing worked. Priests walked through the streets offering last rites, their hands trembling. Bells tolled constantly, announcing yet another death. The once lively harbor became a place of fear. Messina tried to drive the ships away, but it was too late. Sailors who had fled carried the disease to Genoa, Venice, and Marseille. From there, the infection spread like fire across Europe's trade routes. Markets, once filled with laughter and bargaining, grew silent. Caravans arriving from one town were greeted not with open arms, but with suspicion and fear. As the plague reached inland cities, panic turned into chaos. Some people locked themselves away, refusing to touch anyone. Others fled, hoping the sickness would not follow. But the plague traveled faster than they could run. In the darkness of Europe's medieval streets, death had found a new home. The Black Plague was no longer just a distant rumor from the east. It was here, and it would not be contained. By 1348, the Black Plague had swept through Europe with terrifying speed. From the grand cities of Italy to the quiet villages of England, no place was safe. The disease ignored borders, kings, and armies. It moved through ports, rivers, and trade routes, carried by rats and fleas, and by the people themselves. Whole towns were left empty. In some places, there were not enough living to bury the dead. Bells rang endlessly, and the sound became a reminder of how fragile life had become. Fear ruled the land. Some believed the end of the world had arrived. Others turned on each other, accusing strangers, foreigners, and even neighbors of bringing the curse. Religious processions filled the streets as people begged for mercy. Monasteries overflowed with the sick, and even priests and physicians fell victim to the same fate. Wealth and power offered no protection. Kings and peasants died the same way, with fever, swollen flesh, and breath that faded in hours. The Black Plague did more than take lives. It shattered the world's structure. Farms were abandoned, trade routes quieted, and fields grew wild. With so many gone, labor became scarce, changing the balance between lords and workers. The plague forced societies to rebuild themselves in ways they never imagined. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. No one could trace its exact first spark, though its shadow had started in the east, traveled along the Silk Road, and crossed the sea to Europe. What began as an invisible presence among rats and fleas became one of the deadliest events in human history. The world emerged from the plague forever changed, its memory etched into every village, every city, and every surviving heart.